When confronted with a problem, it's always good to have a plan. So what I've done for you guys is put together what I'm just going to call the Angle Chasers Playbook. This is going to be a collection of 4 different things that we can use to help us come across those missing angles in these types of problems. First, let's talk about isosceles triangles. When you have an isosceles triangle, you know that there are 2 sides that are congruent to each other. The benefit of this in trying to chase down those angles is that we know that the 2 angles opposite those congruent sides are also congruent to each other. So in this example here, we know that angle A would be congruent to angle B. So if you're told that, say, angle A has a measure of 50 degrees, you're allowed to instantly conclude that angle B must also be 50 degrees. Now we're going to take that idea and just go one step further when it comes to an equilateral triangle. Remember, an equilateral triangle is a triangle that has all 3 sides congruent to each other. And what you're allowed to then conclude is that all 3 angles are congruent to each other as well. So that would mean that angle A is congruent to angle B, which is also congruent to angle C. Now, in terms of applying a number to that, remember, you're allowed to conclude that all triangles, their 3 angles add up to 180 degrees. So when it comes to an equilateral triangle, and you want to know what each of those angles are, you can simply do 180 divided by 3, which means that all 3 of those angles in an equilateral triangle will always be 60 degrees each. Now let's take a look at play 3. Play number 3 here deals with a linear pair of angles. So remember, that is 2 angles that together form a straight line. We know that a straight line is comprised of 180 degrees. That would be, for instance, from here going all the way over to here, which would create this straight line. Now, if you have just one of those angles, in this case, we know that this one right here, this obtuse angle, is 115 degrees. That means that you can always find the one next to it. So that means that this angle right here would be the full 180 degrees that we just talked about, minus the 115 degrees that you know, which leaves us with leftovers of 65 degrees for this missing angle. Finally, let's take a look at play 4. Play number 4 deals with what's called the triangle sum theorem, which we actually talked about above. The triangle sum theorem states that all 3 angles inside of any triangle will always add up to 180 degrees. Now, what that really means for a strategy is that if you know 2, you can always find the third. So in this example, we're shown 2 angles of 40 degrees and 30 degrees, which instantly means that we can find this third one right here. The strategy there, which I noted, is to use the 2 to find the third. So you can add up the 2 that you know. So in this example, 40 plus 30 together are going to add up to make 70 degrees. Now we know that this third angle is all of the leftovers for that triangle, and that triangle is 180 degrees total. So if we take 180 and subtract the total from the 2 that we know, that's going to leave us with 110 degrees for that leftover angle.